All right, hi, hello. I am Tom. I have made this game. It is called Exemplar, and in this game, you are a medieval scribe working for a wealthy, presumably literate, aristocratic client. Your task, your goal, your purpose in this game is to compile a beautiful manuscript object full of texts and decorations and rubrications and so on. The better your arrangements of these things, the happier your client will be when you present to them the final product. Over the course of this game, you will spend your time purchasing texts from booksellers, loaning texts out from other players, copying texts into your manuscripts, following along with manuscripts that already exist, embellishing your manuscript's text with rubrications, and decorating your manuscript's two magnificent pages. The objective of this game is to get points. The player with the most valuable manuscript in terms of points at end of play wins the game. Value is measured in terms of the manuscript's textual contents, its decorative features, its spatial arrangement, and its ability to follow along with these exemplars, the name of the game. So let's just do a quick run by over the components here. You've got a center market grid with the word exemplar on it. You do not, as the rules state, have 4 stacks of 25 blank manuscript grids because this is the internet and not real life. So I have made fun tiles on TTS that say exemplar, there's room for a text, and then you'll be writing, I'll be writing on these tablets, but IRL, there'll be pieces of paper and you'll use a pencil. There should be 50, in fact, ink cubes, 10 of each color, and here in TTS I've got orange, yellow, pink, purple, and blue. There should be 60 total text cards, and I've put some over here in the discard pile, and I've put some the rest here in the draw pile, as well as some on each space of the market grid. For the purposes of demonstration, actually at the beginning, and some people have some already, at the beginning of the game, all 60 cards will be here in this deck, and we'll get to set up in a moment. There should be 15 total exemplar cards. Again, for the purposes of this demonstration, I've put 5 out already over here, and there's 10 more in this pile, so that's 15 total. There should be 1 decoration tile. These are gold with the letter of the manuscript on them. All of this subject to change. We will have player aids very soon, and in place of the first player quill, I have stolen this delightful dragon thingy from the Clank Legacy mod. So here we are. In order to set up the game, it's fairly straightforward. You're going to place the entire text deck on the draw pile, you'll shuffle it up, and you'll flip 1 text over into each of these spaces. You will also shuffle up the exemplar cards and choose 2 more than there are players. So here I'm going to model a 3-player game with these 3 players, orange, yellow, and pink, but so I've got 3 plus 2 over here, manuscripts. But if we had a 4th player, we'd have 4 plus 2. If we had a 5th player, we'd have 5 plus 2. And for each manuscript card that you grab, for example, here's manuscript card D, you will also grab its corresponding decoration tile. These come in all different shapes and sizes, and it is intended that the letters remain right side up and legible, not funky and sideways when you place them. I'll say that again later just in case. Once everyone has their player mat, their fun little tokens, once these things are set up, the game is ready to begin. Before we jump into flow of play, let me just take a minute to describe the cards themselves to you. So let's look at this guy here. This is a poem I know and love, written a fun essay about it. This is the Revelation of Goliath, the Bishop. In fact, I'll zoom in so I can point at things with my fun little mouse. Hello, it's my hand. So this says, the top, well, let's do the easy part. This is the title of the poem, and this is some fun flavor text that I wrote off the top of my head one smashing Saturday evening. The crucial information about the text card itself for the purposes of gameplay happens at the top. So here, this number 4 in the longer banner indicates the length of lines that this poem takes. So we know we're going to be writing this poem in lines of length 4. And this says how many of those lines there are going to be. So we're going to write a poem that is 2 lines long, and each line is 4 squares in length. That's a bad example. That says 5. But you can imagine if we were writing this poem over here in this person's manuscript, we would have lines length 4, and there are 2 of them. The other crucial piece of information here is in the upper right-hand corner. This says when you finish copying this poem, no matter what, you're going to get 1 point, that bigger bubble in the upper right. And then if you double space it, and we'll talk about double spacing later, you will also get 1 bonus point. So if we look down here at, say, Guy of Warwick, the Lowborn Knight, it's also line length 4, but there are 6 lines, and you're going to get 5 points for that, plus a bonus 3, so 8 total if you double space it. So as you can see, there are longer and shorter texts that you're going to be copying. Each of these texts appears in at least one of the potential manuscript exemplars, and that's what these letters are telling you. So the Revelation of Goliath the Bishop appears in manuscripts J, K, and M. Now, that's a good invitation to come over here and look at our manuscript cards. We have manuscripts D, A, C, B, and O. I just drew them in that order. Funny that we got A, B, C, D. Somebody can tell me the odds of that later, but we'll notice that none of those are J, K, and M. So for the purposes of this game, the Revelation of Goliath the Bishop may not be terribly useful. On the exemplar cards themselves, also, we've got a sort of double cross-referencing system here. Is a list, on each card is a list of the texts that correspond to that manuscript. So if we look, for example, at manuscript A, the Pearl manuscript, it contains Pearl, Patience, Cleanness, and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and all of the medievalists out there can be mad that it does not contain Sir Erkenwald. So if you were going for texts in manuscript A, you might keep an eye out for those poems, and you might say, aha, there's Pearl, there's Patience. Okay, we've got something really going here. The components of a manuscript card are fairly straightforward. You've got its title, its indicating letter, which will ultimately be a symbol, and then you have tiers of points, which we'll talk more about later, and the amount of points that the decoration is worth, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later too. So, so in this case, the Pearl manuscript has 4 texts. If you copy 2 of them, that's the first tier. 3 of them, that's the second tier. 4 of them, that's the third tier, and whoever gets the decoration tile on their manuscript will get a bonus 8 points. A lot of points to be had here. So it's the name of the game. Okay. Play in Exemplar proceeds in rounds, and players are going to take turns in clockwise order over the course of each round until all players have used all of their action cubes. And it should be noted, not all players will take the same number of actions, or turns, if you will, every round. Anytime a player is in possession of at least 1 action cube, they must take an action, even if they don't exactly want to. Right? So if you've got a cube, you've got to use it. If you've got no cubes, you don't use them. And that's the flow of the play. So there are 6 actions that a player can take when it is their turn, depending on the number of action cubes they have available to them and what they want to do. Those actions are, and I'll just do them in order and then dig into them in detail, those actions are purchase, borrow, copy, rubricate, follow, and scrape. Let's start with purchase. So purchase simply means you're going to take 1 text out of the shop market grid and place it in your possession. The cost of the card that you pick up is indicated at the top of the column that you take that card from. So, the cards are totally neutral here. If you want the card that's here, it's always going to cost 3. The card here is always going to cost 2. The card here is always going to cost 1. So let's say it's the orange player's turn. The orange player has already in his possession Sir Beavis of Hampton, the Blood-Rage Knight. And that corresponds to manuscript C and D. So, orange player's feeling pretty good about that. So he's looking for other manuscripts or other texts that correspond to C and D, and he sees Guy of Warwick, the Lowborn Knight. So that is in the column corresponding to 2. He will take that text into his possession, and he will pay 2 action cubes out of his own supply into wherever the heck he puts them. Right? When anyone does that, the corresponding card in the same column will be discarded. Any cards to the left of it will be shifted over, and new cards will be drawn immediately, so that there are new choices for the next player. When this player acquires a new text, he may, if he is permitted, place that text in his active text area. There are conditions for changing active text, and they go something like this. Anytime a player acquires a new text, they can put it in their active area, unless they have already started copying the text that is already there. So if this person had copied one square, just one measly little square of Sir Beavis of Hampton, the orange player could not then swap in Guy of Warwick, the Lowborn Knight. That would be illegal because this text has been begun already. But if, he's copied something else, pretend he's copied some other poem, who cares what it is, we don't right now, right? But he hasn't started Sir Beavis of Hampton, then he could swap out Sir Beavis of Hampton and in Sir Guy of Warwick, and that is going to matter for our next action. But this is the crucial, crucial, crucial bit. If you've already started copying one text, you cannot replace it with another text. You must finish it or totally erase its contents before replacing it at all. Okay, so here we are. Let's say, orange player was getting a little feisty, said, let's grab the Guy of Warwick and put it as our active text. Now it is the yellow player's turn, and the yellow player will model our second action, which is borrow. Borrowing is just like taking a market from the shop grid, except for that you are taking it from one of your friends. So yellow is looking around the room. He's like, I'm going to copy this King of Tards. It corresponds to manuscript D. Nothing on the board is looking in particular inspiring here. There's no other Ds. There's kind of a C, but orange player just put out Sir Beavis of Hampton, the Blood Rage Knight, and it is not his active text. So yellow player may either pay 2 cubes, wow, that is 5 cubes, may play 2 cubes to take that text. Any text that is not an active text, he can choose from among his peers and place it into his possession. Or alternatively, instead of paying 2 cubes, he can pay 1 cube to the orange player, and that is now the orange player's cube to use for the duration of play. So borrowing is just like going to the market, except for you don't use the market, you use cards that are already in play among other players. You can either pay for it with 2 cubes or 1 cube, but if you use 1 cube, that is somewhat of a bonus to the player that you are paying. Just like acquiring a card from the Exemplar market grid, as long as you haven't started copying your active text already, you can swap in the one that you just took and start copying it your next turn. The next action is copy. This is easily the most confusing. I will talk more at length about it in just a moment. But for now, let me just point out its variable costs. As we saw earlier, if you want to copy Sir Beavis of Hampton, you need lines of length 4 and you need 6 of them. So that's going to be 24 total squares on the grid. 4 times 6 is 24. Okay, so the way that you accomplish that, in real life, you'll be holding a pencil and you'll scribble, hey, I'm doing it, I'm trying, but because this is Tabletop Simulator and I'm making do for the purposes of this video, I'm using these funny little line chunkers. So if you spend 1 ink, you get to copy 2 squares. If you spend 2 ink, you get to copy 4 squares. If you spend 3 ink, you get to copy 8 squares. 4 ink, 12 squares. 5 ink, 18 squares. And 6 ink, 28 squares. So if we think, okay, we need to get to 24, if we just have 6 ink available to us, there's 3, there's 6, right? We can copy all of the lines of Sir Beavis, the Blood Rage Knight, into our manuscript. And again, this is a little funny because we're on a computer. Placing things is a pain in the booty. But usually what you would do IRL is you would write Beavis of Hampton in these little spots enough that you could remember and how many points you get for it, which is 5. In our case, what we'll do is we'll make a copy of the card and shrink it way down. And that'll just remind us of what poem that poem is. You can only copy 1 text at a time, and if you haven't finished copying it, you don't get to start something else. So let's say this player did not, in fact, have 6 cubes. They only had 3 cubes. Well, then they might say, I would like to start into this poem for next time, so I'm going to spend my 3 cubes in order to copy 8 squares, which I've sort of modeled for you here, right? And then next round, they would get all these cubes back, and they can finish copying the remaining 16 squares, which will only cost them 5 ink instead of 6 ink. So a total loss of ink, but the inefficiency is made up for by other strategic elements. Okay, that's copying. We will come back to more copying soon. The next action, the fourth action, is to rubricate. And so let's pretend this player had, in fact, already copied all of the lines of Sir Beavis of Hampton, the Blood Rage Knight. And they want to make it prettier because, you know, this is a game about pretty things. There are 2 options here for rubrication. These are aesthetic modification you make with your pencil, your writing utensil, to the text you have copied, so there's no separate gameplay materials necessary IRL for rubrication. What I'm going to do here is use some TTS tools to sort of demonstrate what it might look like. So the first thing you can do is pay 3 ink to add a rubricated initial to the first 2x2 square of the poem. So it might look something like a giant orange splotch that you make more beautifully than I do, and then so you would have still completed the entire poem. This is still Beavis of Hampton. You actually wrote the whole thing before doing this, but instead of just boring pencil lines, you would have a pretty pencil capital letter of some kind at the beginning here, probably S or B for Sir or Beavis. Rubricated initials, you're going to count how many you have on this side and square that number. Then you'll count how many you have on this side and square that number and add them together for points at game end. The other way that you can rubricate is to add paraph markers. This is a thing scribes actually did back in the day, alongside each line of text. This is going to cost you 2 ink. You'll paraph every line of text, and at game end you'll get points for doing that. And so again, IRL, you will use a pencil, but here I've made a fun little stamp. You know, we'll add little paraphs. So, you know, you've copied Sir Beavis of Hampton. It was already worth 5 points, and now you've added value to your text by doing these things to it over the course of the game, spending first 3 and then 2 inks to do so. The fifth thing you can do, the fifth action you can take, is you can follow along with a manuscript exemplar, these fun guys over here. So we'll use Pink as our example here because Pink's cubes are nearby, but let's say that Pink had copied, just like this manuscript card request, the Auchinleck manuscript has copied 4 of its texts. It does not matter which 4. Then the Pink player, I know it doesn't show it having done that, but you can believe it. Then the Pink player could pay 1 cube on this spot and receive 5 points at game end for having copied 4 out of 8 total texts. If they had copied 6 texts, they would get 12 points at game end for playing it here, 8 texts playing it here. Now, if for whatever reason the Pink player had copied all 8 texts but wanted to go for the lowest tier, they could do that, right? And if over the course of the game no one else copies any text from the Auchinleck manuscript and it's just sort of the Pink player's bag, then it's possible that all of their cubes end up in all 3 of these tiers, yielding them, is that 38 points just from this manuscript. You may be wondering, Tom, what about these decorations? Great question. The first player to place any ink cube on any given exemplar gets the opportunity to place its decoration tile on their manuscript. Now there's one very, very important rule here. You cannot place the decoration tile if you don't have room for it. It has to go somewhere. But this is important. It can always go over paraph marks, which are sort of bonus obligatory things that you write down when you're playing the game. But you know, if it were necessary to place, this would actually be impossible because there would be a line of text there. But you know, if it were necessary to place the decoration tile over a paraph mark, that would be acceptable. Otherwise, if you cannot play the decoration tile, you cannot take it, and the opportunity would be given to the next person who plays on that exemplar card. So let's say, Pink's an early adopter of the Auchinleck manuscript, but decides not to take the decoration. Then yellow swoops in and gets the second tier. Yellow might then pick up this decoration tile, which will yield 7 more points at game's end. There cannot be any more than 1 cube on each tier, so at this point, for example, even if the orange player played every single text in the Auchinleck manuscript, there's nothing they can do about it in this case. The big caveat with Exemplar cards is at the end of each round, you do not get these particular cubes back. So if in the first round you copy 2 texts from the Pearl manuscript and throw a cube down, that's great. You get 2 points at endgame, you're the first to the tile, but you're never going to see that cube again. It is stuck in Exemplar land. So there is a long-term cost to following a manuscript Exemplar. The final action you can take is scrape, so we'll come back to our example over here with, we have Beavises everywhere. Get out of here, Beavis. We'll come back over here to our example with Guy of Warwick, the Lowborn Knight. Let's say that this player had copied with 1 cube remaining, exactly 1 line of that text, and then later on in the game, they purchased Sir Gingalain, the Fair Unknown, and they really actually, man, I don't want to be copying Guy of Warwick, the Lowborn Knight. I want to be copying Sir Gingalain, the Fair Unknown. There is a way to make this happen. For 5 lines, that's 5 horizontal lines of any length, does not matter how long, but for 1 cube it would still be, you may pay 1 cube to scrape away any 5 horizontal lines of text. So this 1 cube would obviously get rid of this 1 square, but if the player had made an arrangement mistake or realized much later how devastating it was to copy Guy of Warwick instead of Sir Gingalain, then, maybe they're willing to pay 2 cubes to do 10 lines or so on. And this is kind of an action of last resort. So these are the actions. Again, I'll remind you, since in our example, yellow paid a cube to orange, orange will get to use that cube as his own. Once everyone has used all their cubes, and we'll give this one back to the person it belongs to, a few things are going to happen. First, we're going to get all the cubes back. And again, that's going to be all the cubes except the ones up here on the exemplars. Those do not come back into play ever again. No matter what, whichever text is active for each player, that text is going to remain. Then each player is going to choose 1 text in their position otherwise, in this case for the yellow player, either Queen Nis or the King of Tars to also retain. So you always get sort of 2 texts for free, and in fact you must retain 1 other text if you have 1 other text. So the pink player couldn't just go throwing away Eric and Mead and Alison Amalune for no reason, right? You always keep your active text, and 1 more you must if you can. Then, if you want to keep up to 2 more cards, you may pay 1 ink each from the future round. So, you've got all your inks back. Yellow's like, man, I want to keep Beavis, I want to keep Queen Nis, and I want to keep the King of Tars. I'm going to spend 1 of my next round's cubes to also keep the King of Tars. Just an example here, let's say Orange over here had been collecting all kinds of texts. Orange is going to say, I bought these texts, but I don't really care about them. Actually, I'm just going to throw away Sir Gingalain and the Parliament of Fowls, and I'll keep my 1 free text, King Alexander of Greece. Right? So all of the players are going to get all their cubes back, decide which texts they can or must keep. Any texts that are discarded go into the discard pile. We're going to take the 2 cards nearest to the discard pile and place them in it. We're going to slide all of the texts over and flip 2 new cards, and this is just to encourage market activity in the world. And then we're going to pass the first player marker to the next person. That, my friends, is the flow of play. There are 6 actions, there are variable costs, and they're all extremely, extremely fun, let me tell you. So let's talk a little bit more about copying texts, and I'm going to use my friend the yellow player here. They've been pretty great for us. We're going to use the yellow player here for these examples. So the yellow player has already, in our example here, copied Sir Beavis of Hampton, the Blood Rage Knight. This is very important. We actually broke a rule in the example. The minute that you are done copying a text, it leaves your active area and goes into your set of available text that other people can borrow, right? So this is the first thing. When you finish a text, it's gonzo. It is no longer your active text. You're done with it. Someone else can borrow it. For any text that you copy, just like we've done here, all of its lines must be left aligned on the grid. So you couldn't copy, let's choose a new one, the King of Tars. You couldn't say, oh, well, I'm going to put the first 4 lines of the King of Tars here, and the next one's kind of over, and the next one's kind of over, and we'll do it. Right? Like, this is totally not okay. We aren't writing modernist poetry here. This is a medieval-themed and medieval-inspired game. The point is, all of the texts in this game are left aligned. Make sure when you finish a text that you write down IRL how many points you got for it, and any manuscripts it corresponded to. So all text must be left aligned. There must be at least one space of separation between every text, both vertically and horizontally. So this is a very legal position to place the King of Tars. The internet is the future. It could also be placed here, but it cannot be placed butting up to Sir Beavis of Hampton. Then whoever's reading it is like, is this Sir Beavis of the King of Tars? That doesn't make any sense. I've never heard of it, right? Similarly, it could be placed here, it could be placed here, it could be placed right smack dab in the middle, but it may not be placed right underneath Sir Beavis of Hampton because, again, Sir Beavis of the King of what? Anyway, those are the rules. There must be at least one full square of separation between any 2 texts, both vertically and horizontally. You could, if you're feeling cute, I guess you could put this text here, but you cannot put it here. That would not be okay. Okay, so here we've got the King of Tars. We'll put him a little bit over. We've talked a little bit about double spacing, but I will repeat myself a bit now. In order to double space the text, there must be one blank line of unused grid space in between each of the lines of text. So in the case of the King of Tars, we would do something like this, right? Line blank, line blank, line blank, line. It doesn't matter if this one's blank, because if you were going to copy, another 4x4 text below it, you would still need to leave a line of separation between them. So it matters not whether you think of that as the line of separation between them or as the double spacing after the last line. So in this case, with the King of Tars, you would receive 3 points for having done it at all, plus another bonus 2 points for having double spaced it. And if you're rubricating a double spaced text, it's just like rubricating a single spaced text. You would stamp your PARAPHS on each line of text, but not each line of not text, because there's nothing there. It's a blank line. It's supposed to be blank. Okay, so this player has just paid their 6 cubes to copy the King of Tars and double space it, and at some point they also did PARAPHS, and the minute they finished double spacing it, it went out of their active text, they paid for their PARAPHS, a new line starts. Okay, we're in a new round, and this person wants to copy the Canterbury Tales, the Parson's Tales. So they go to copy this thing down, and they're like, okay, this thing is, whoa, the line length is 40, and then it's P lines long? That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, dear video watcher. Let me explain. This is a prose text. In the medieval period, they also read prose sometimes. And what this means is that you just have to take up 40 total squares, but the line length is not predetermined. So if you wanted to copy this out as, I don't think you can do 40 lines of 1 line long. But if you wanted to copy it at length 2 of 20 lines, you could do that. I'm not going to demonstrate it here. Another perhaps sensible way to approach this would be to say, okay, I'm going to make my line lengths 10, and then I only have to have 4 of them. So we might grab, let's see, we need 1, we need 7s and 3s, I guess. So, you might do line lengths 10, and you would do them, oopsies, you copy and paste. Okay, well, fine, kind of useless. Right, again, IRL, you're writing this down with a pencil, you don't have to click any buttons. right? And this would be Canterbury Tales, the Parson's Tale. You have taken up 40 total squares, and all of the line lengths are the same. But let's say you chose a slightly less convenient number, and you said, because of the way my manuscript is laid out, I actually want my line length to be 6. So you would write down 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36, and you're like, oh my goodness, this does not divide evenly. What am I going to do? Good news for you. You're just going to copy the last 4 lines as the last line. So for a prose text, again, they must all be left aligned, and all but one line have to be the same. The last line, and only the last line, not the first line, not the third line, not the whateverth line, right? But the last line may be a different length than all of the other ones. In this case, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. 4 to round out the 40 necessary squares that this text occupies. And again, upon completion, you would receive 8 points. Had you double spaced it, you would also get 3 more. Wow, great job, yellow player. You are extremely winning this game, being the example player. So that's how you copy text. It is the sort of bread and butter of this game. Overall, you're going to take texts, you're going to copy them, you're going to decorate them, and you're going to score them. The end of the game is triggered in one of 2 ways. The first way, and the more common, is that every manuscript exemplar has at least 1 tier filled. So we can see it in this case. There are 3 tiers filled of the Auchinleck manuscript and 1 each of the Pearl, British Library Egerton MS 2862, Lincoln's and Library Halem manuscript 150, and Chantilly Musée Condé MS 472. There's at least 1 cube on each of these exemplar cards. That's going to trigger the end game, which means everyone for this round finishes playing whatever cubes they have left, and then you don't have to do end round processing because it's all over. The second way for the game to end is that some player has copied at least 9 total texts, that's text on the left and the right side of their manuscript, with at least 3 texts on each side. So 9 total texts, but they can't all be in one place. When the game end is triggered, in that case, just as before, all players would play their remaining cubes, and then the round would end, and the game would end. In terms of scoring, it's all very straightforward. You're going to go through and follow these final scoring categories. So for Beavis of Hampton, you get 5. For Parson's Tale, you get 8. For the King of Tars, you get 3. You would add all of the things that you copied into your grid and put that in the text column. Then you would go over to the manuscript and you would add up whatever numbers were under your little cubes, right? So pink here would get 12 and 21 and 5. That's a pretty good date for pink, right? And then of course you would put that number under manuscripts. Then you would count the decorations you had accomplished. So really terrible example. Pink here would have decoration B and decoration O, right? So receiving 8 and 7 points. So there's 15 more, and they'd write 15 in their little decoration spot. Similarly with rubrications, we'd go to our rubrication rules. On this side, we would count up all of our rubricated initials. On this side, we would count up all of our rubricated initials, square this number, add them together. Don't add them together and then square, that's cheating. Square this one, then add them together. That's not cheating. And then for each side, again, count the total number of paraphs. For every 3 paraphs, you're going to get 1 point. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3 points, and then a leftover paraph. And it's like, well, that's just not worth any points. Sorry. And we would do that again for the right-hand side. Okay. Then the last one is the most confusing. You're going to get a kind of luxury bonus for totally blank columns, not rows, columns. And for the purposes of this metric, paraphs do not count as filling a column. So this person would have a blank column here, and then 2 blank columns here on the right-hand side. you're going to count pairs of columns. So in this case, there's only one pair of columns that would be worth one pair. And over here, if we had more text, we'd count them up. For pairs of columns, you'll get points at the end of the game. So if you've done all 4 pairs of my columns, that is 2 vertical on the left here and 2 vertical on the right, and over here also 2 vertical on the left and 2 vertical on the right, you'll get 14 more points. You'll add all these numbers together. Somebody will have the highest number, and that person will win. And there are a bunch of tiebreakers in the rules that I made up on the fly. And that is how you play Exemplar. I'll make one final note, which is just that in my examples, I worked from upper left to bottom right, just out of convenience, but you don't have to do that. You could copy the parson's tale first. You could stick it in the upper right of the right-hand side. You could stick it in the middle. You can put your text wherever you want to, so long as they are arranged according to the rules of the game. Let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, I hope you enjoy playing it, and I hope this video has been helpful, because it was certainly fun to make. Bye.